Of course, we know, according to our story in the Garden of Eden, which we've talked about, God said, if you eat of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, you're going to have the death experience. You're going to die. And you're going to die that very moment. Because you're dividing up that which is perfect, and you're trying to put labels on it and see it in dualistic terms. This is what the ego mind thrives in. The ego loves to see good and evil. And the world is pretty reflective of that. So here we have that mode of goodness when I'm becoming the Mother Teresa. My mind is, I'm going to get up in the morning, what can I do good today? What can I do to fix this? How can I feed the world? How can I do this? How can I do that? Now, that's great for somebody who was on a level 3 to wake up and decide that they want to become very good. That's perfect. But now, if we want to become awakened, and as Einstein said, I want to know how God thinks, the rest of the details. God is non-judging. Doesn't judge. God loves unconditionally. God doesn't see good and bad. Now that's hard for a lot of Christians to embrace that concept. God doesn't see good and bad. God doesn't. God allows good, and God allows the evil in terms of experience within the dream. We want to wake up. If we want to awaken to unconditional love, we can no longer see good and evil. You can't see it any longer. It no longer will register for you. That's why Christ said, I didn't come into this world to judge the world, but to save the world. You know, I don't judge any flesh. That's what Jesus said. I don't judge the flesh. You judge of the flesh. And that was the distinction between how Jesus was walking in the world and how others usually walk in the world. When you judge of the flesh, relative to the senses and the linear experience that we go through on a day-to-day, I mean, we all have these kind of minds. We've all had this experience. We're all good at judging. What we're not good at is non-judging. That's what we're non-practiced in. We haven't really spent too much time sitting there and interacting in the world with a non-judgmental mind. Many people would say it can't be done. But it's very interesting that you brought all this up, because it's exactly where we're going to be heading tonight. Because we left off last week. I believe we left off on page 33. And I'm going to just read the last chapter that we finished off with last week, and then we'll go on to where we are this week. Last chapter said, until one returns to love and oneness, the best one can hope for is to become a good ego. Exactly what we're talking about. This is the theme of the Old Testament. It teaches people to follow the letter of the law and to become the best ego they can become, which is exactly what this woman was talking about here. It is not until the New Testament that the idea is introduced that becoming a good ego is merely a step along the path towards full awareness, rebirthing. Now this is what Christians many times miss when they talk about, have you been reborn, have you been reborn? They don't understand the emphasis of living in a world with the mind of Christ through non-judgmental eyes. That's truly rebirthing. Rebirthing means to live as Christ would live, view as Christ would view, and interact as Christ would interact. That's rebirthing. I haven't met too many Christians that actually live that. But until this rebirthing occurs, you will continue to experience your journey trapped within the confines of hell. And I say the confines of hell because heaven would be living within the awakened state. Hell would be anything other than that. That's the definition I used here. Okay? Now, some people would say, I've met a gentleman who says, I love my life. This is beautiful, I love it. To him, he's saying this is heaven. Well, there are states that he could experience that would supersede what he thinks is the highest state he's in. But until we open to having these experiences, we don't know what they entail. We haven't had that experience personally. We think, well, this is it. I don't want to let anything interfere in this. This is the best I can hope for. No, there's more. There's much, much more if we can allow our minds to open.
But that's where there's free will.
That's the free will.
If you're a soul and you don't choose to go any higher,
Then you're here.
you're there.
And this is one of the reasons why when the Bible talks about living in hell for all of eternity, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit further on here, everything's a choice now. Here's now. When does now begin? No. When does it begin?
Always was.
Always was. In terms of that which we have identified as linear time, we think that we're in a progressive evolutionary track. Okay, on one hand we are, within the dream. However, we are living our version of this now, this very instant. So why Rumi said, you're tasting the taste of eternity this very moment. You're tasting the taste of eternity because in terms of eternity, as Einstein said, the past, the present, the future is nothing but a persistent delusion of consciousness. If you're not experiencing the fullness of creation, if you're not experiencing agape love and seeing the oneness of everything, well, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It just means that we have shut ourselves off from allowing the experience. Doesn't mean it's not out there. Just like I've said many times, you hear the music playing? Well, not right now, but the radio waves are there. You tune in, you hear the music. You shut it off, it's off. You shut off the outward experiences in your exchange for just this limited view, that's all you're going to experience. Doesn't mean it's not there. It's there. And it has been, always will be, and the fact that we're not living it is a choice. And we have free will, yes. We have free will to say, now, I'm staying here for all of eternity, or for at least next 150 lifetimes, or whatever. Doesn't matter. But the point is, yes, we all have it within us. No one was created special. And we all have it within us to accept or reject in every moment. That's what we're going to get into a little bit deeper here. Because now, what we're moving into is the Christ. What was Jesus' message to the world? And this is very, very important because I think a lot of Christians have kind of missed Jesus' message. How did he differ from the ones before him? In order to correctly answer these questions, it would be helpful to look at the overall message of the New Testament. As the name indicates, the New Testament was not just, and I say just, a continuation of the past, but also the introduction of something new and different. But if we read the New Testament, it's very interesting. A lot of what's in the New Testament is directly out of the Old Testament, right?
Oh, yes.
Isn't it?
Yeah, there is.
A lot of it is.
Yeah, it is.
But it's out of the Old Testament with a new slant. And this is where, until we understand what's that slant, once you understand what it is, now you can look at anything in the New Testament and see it in the Old Testament, and you can see why these two states exist. You could see why certain people believed in this and other people believe this way. We'll get to that in a little bit.
You know, it's always just amazing. And when somebody put that to parchment, some of those wisdom things you read in the Old Testament, you know, that's how many thousands of years ago that somebody come up with that. It's just amazing that that wisdom was there at that length of time ago. Yeah.
Well, again, Doug, in terms of ultimate reality, in terms of the now,
Yep. No.
right?
Right.
That which is what we would experience in 10 millennium from now,
Yeah.
doesn't it not already exist in terms of that which could be experienced?
Yes. Right.
All we need do is have a shift in consciousness, and everything is available. And this is why, yes, you're right. If you look at it in terms of linear, you say, how
Yeah.
could they know this
Yeah.
then?
No, because
Okay.
they went through the process on their own. You know, reading, what the heck's that? Psalms. Psalms is some guys' daily meditative comments, and
Mhm.
that's what that is. That's
Right.
just amazing.
And so he was having altered states. He was
Yeah.
shifting.
Yeah.
I talked about Tesla in the past in here. Tesla was an inventor, and
Okay.
Tesla many times said when he was open, he would receive. He's going to invent a washing machine, whatever,
Yeah.
and he would see the whole thing in its completion, and including all the parts right down to the smallest
Okay.
detail,
Yeah.
already done before he started.
Yeah.
Now, where did he get it? It already exists. In that universal mind, everything exists now. And that's what we lose sight of when we look in terms of just limited linear thinking. So it's a constant job for us to remember that we can move beyond linear. We can always move beyond linear limitations because they're only there to the exact degree that we hang on to them. Now, that's tough, and I know that it's hard to accept at first, but what's interesting is, as you accept, you will personally experience beyond the limitations that you previously held. And so, everything can be proved out to every individual for themselves. Nothing has to be taken on faith entirely. You need faith to begin the process. You don't need faith to continue the process. What will happen is you will have experiences that will validate where you're headed. And as you have an experience and it gets validated, it becomes easier to accept, and you can move a little deeper, a little closer, a little closer. In the beginning of the Bible, we read that man was created by God, that the man that was created by God was in direct communication with him and was under grace. The fall from grace came from man's choosing to ignore God's command not to judge his world, in spite of the warning that they would die that very day. That's the story that's told in the Old Testament. I think it's very, very good, and it's a great metaphor to represent what happened. Once they began to see things with human instead of divine eyes, they were forced to leave paradise. When man chooses to see or interpret things in his way, the experience that results is called death. This death or hell can continue forever, but is not necessarily eternal. It could continue forever, but it's not eternity. But because of the now. Because time, as we understand time, is not true and valid. Linear time is not a restriction. And because it's not a restriction, if we all came into agreement right here, right now, to live in a higher level of awareness and let go of our past, what would stop us? Nothing. Right, Mick?
Yep.
So if we're not living it, why? Yeah. Now, one of the things after our discussion last week, when you left, again, Rumi was talking about having a conversation with God, and Rumi, in describing that moment with his communication with God, was speaking, and he said, "I want to die to myself, and I want to see you with 1,000 eyes." In other words, I want to experience this to the fullest. And God's response was, knowing me doesn't mean dying.
Yeah.
You don't have to die.
Oh, no.
Of course not.
Moses doesn't die in the Old Testament.
No.
He supposedly gets blinded by the light of God, but he doesn't die.
You don't die. What you do is you move to a higher state of life, of real life. Not the illusionary life, but the real life. That which is beyond the mind. And here's Psalms for you, Doug.
What's that?
Here's
Psalm.
Psalms.
Oh,
Psalms. Consider and answer me, O Lord, my God. Lighten my eyes, lest I sleep the sleep of death.
Okay.
Right? So he's basically saying, help me see what it is, or else I'm going to be continuing to
Yeah.
be asleep and have this death experience. Since the beginning of, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
It's
It's fun to try to take that stuff out of Psalms and bring it into 21st century language. And first person for that matter. But yeah, really bring it into first person, but in 21st century language. It's a real trick.
it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's extremely helpful to moving one from the limited view to the more expansive view.
Yeah, expansive.
When you take something like this and you look at it and you say, okay, and that's why I say this book, any book, I don't care what it is, if you're looking at something, you really should look at it and move yourself in there and say, what is this really conveying? I remember my first book that I wrote, It's All One Truth, and someone came to me and said, I read your book last night, I thought it was great, and I agree 100% with what you said.
But what did you say?
I said,
They didn't get it.
no. I said, I wrote the book, but if I read it, it would take me probably 3 weeks.
And you
Probably
would agree
3 weeks.
100% with everything.
Well, no, I would agree, but my idea is, when I was writing it, I was in it.
Yes.
I was in it.
You're in it.
And when I'm reading,
Yeah.
I'm in it. And if I'm not in it, I'm not reading it. You read words, and if you're not reading in it, you're getting nothing.
Yep.
You read it all, oh, wasn't that something? Well, next, next, and this is why I think we've been 15 weeks and we just got 34 pages here. Because we're getting into it.
Yeah.
Since the beginning of time, most of us have not understood that there is a resurrection from the death experience, a rebirthing of consciousness, if you will. This rebirthing is an automatic result of choosing love and God over personal desire for people or things in this world. Okay, so we're talking about the death experience. We all know what the death experience is. It's living with a human mind. So, in every moment, in our now, we have a choice. Awake or asleep. Life, death. This is a choice. It's a choice. We don't have to earn life. Oh, we don't have to earn death.
No, you don't have to be a good boy long enough to gain life.
What we have to do is choose.
Yeah.
Right? We choose love or we choose fear. In every moment. Love, and this love, I'm going to put over here unconditional. Unconditional love, which is spiritual. Ego. That's it. I mean, it doesn't matter where we are, what we're doing, doesn't matter what country we're in, doesn't matter what faith we've been brought up in, doesn't matter any of that. We have a choice. Right here, right now, and now always is. Could be yesterday, could be tomorrow, could be, now always is. 2,000, 10,000 years ago, or into the future. It's now.
It's worth $2 off.
So we have to decide. And that's what it's about. You decide. And once you made a decision, know this. You're going to experience relative to the decision you made. Now, of course, there's an intricate system, and that's why the Course in Miracles, are you familiar with the Course in Miracles, by the way? A little bit?
The concept.
Concept, okay. Course in Miracles says there's two complete thought systems. One is based on love, one is based on fear. So if you choose the thought system of fear, then it's a system. It's not just one little thing. There's many details to the system. And part of those details are numerous lifetimes of playing game. And there's evolution within the system of fear. And basically, the journey that we find Adam and Eve and mankind is on is the journey through fear. It's not the journey through love. It's the journey through fear. It's the dream. It's the nightmare, if you will. Choosing God is very different for us. Most people believe that it is impossible. And I've heard many, many people. We talk about, well, Jesus said this, Jesus said... Yeah, but Jesus was special. He was the Son of God. I'm only human. You can't...
you're saying that.
I'm saying this is...
That's what we...
Many people say this.
Say that.
Many people say this.
All
Well,
right.
Jesus was special. Jesus was this, Jesus was that. I can't be Jesus. That's what I hear many, many times.
Horse feathers.
That is why Jesus was sent from the light, which is love, into the world of darkness and fear. He came to demonstrate that indeed it could be done. If you take the time to understand and follow his example, it is certain that you will be transformed. And that's something I would say unequivocally. Anyone who emulates and lives as Christ has to have the transformation experience. Guaranteed, hands down, 100%.
I've been doing some reading, kind of research. Sounds like a good word, but it may be a little strong. About where did Jesus and his cousin John come from, you know? And I've drawn the conclusion that as little kids, they threw rocks at the girls and played with the neighbor's dog, just like anybody else did. And that John's dad got those two kids associated with the Essene Brotherhood. And that's where they got a lot of their training and their education, so that they could go off into public. And not a lot of Essenes are set forth to go out there. And these two guys were, because they had a pretty clear understanding of who they were and that kind of thing. And but they were still humans doing it. And Jesus did he was out there for 3 years being a minister of sorts, doing a lot of healings and doing a lot of preaching and trying to get people to figure out this stuff. But he still reverted back into that human, this kind of a clunky-dunk environment from time to time.
He was born a Jew and raised a Jew, and so he reverted back to the environment. He knew the years that he left, supposedly, in history, and when you look at I was at the Rockefeller Museum in Israel, and they had just translated the last of the scrolls, and they talked about this unknown person who they assumed was Jesus traveling with the Essenes, because the reigning political group at the time wasn't as religious enough for them, or strong enough for them, or everything they wanted, so they traveled through the desert. So he was his environment. And he had to go past that environment that he grew up in. Elevate himself.
But he went through, it was a 10-year process from the time you start till the time you actually get to join the club fully. Those kids went through a lot of time there, learning a lot of stuff, memorizing an immense amount of stuff, I imagine. But once they got into the club itself, totally different environment, for sure. And then you start going into the meditative times and things like that, where you can get to understand who we really are in relationship to this energy we call God.
But he wouldn't have had those opportunities had he not been awake coming into his human form. Wouldn't you agree?
Well, I would
What's
say,
that?
He wouldn't have been in positions to have those experiences and those opportunities to learn if he wasn't at a certain vibrational level.
More elevated,
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. Who knows? Yeah, but he and his cousin John, those kids went into that and they took with it. Yeah, and I think those kids had a better
Chocolate peanut butter house.
take towards that spirituality than most other kids did. And so I think John's dad really caught on to this stuff and got those kids into the Essene community. But, you know, and then Jesus gets out there and he's got if he can't stay in his, even when he tries it by staying into, you know, taking time out, going off into his meditative time. For the most part, that really helped. That kept his ducks in a row.
Right.
But
Certainly does.
you know, he goes into the synagogue and here he got all these money changers in there. And he gets madder than hell at these guys and he's in there raising hell and tearing the place apart. Well, see,
human.
he switched back into the human
Yeah.
dynamic again. Or when, you know, he went off into a meditative time, he knew he was going to be arrested. And so he and his buddies went off into a meditative time. And he says, look, I'm going up there. I got to be by myself. You guys stay here and keep a positive energy going and pray for me. He comes back and all these guys are sleeping. Jeez, he gets mad at him. You know, he's really frustrated with those guys because they fell asleep.
Yeah.
So see, you kind of,
Yeah.
you know, you're going to have that happen, I think. I wonder, really, you can't go by what you read in text, but it'd be really interesting to understand or perceive what he went through spiritually and mentally and all that kind of stuff as the execution process went on and while he was in that process. To really, if he really understood where the heck this is taking him. Yeah, it would be
So,
very
Doug,
fascinating.
Wouldn't you say he was vacillating back and forth from the human?
But it's
From the human-
fascinating. Yeah, he's
His fear.
vacillating, but
He had fear.
it's fascinating to me too. Yeah.
Oh, I looked at that, and
Yeah.
the first time I looked at Jesus' experience in that regard as the human, I looked and I said, you know, now when I saw him in that light, all of a sudden I had a respect for him that I didn't hold when I was growing up as a Catholic, when I was told Jesus was the only begotten Son of the Father and the man without sin, and he was perfect. And I looked at that when I was a child and I said, I looked at that and I said, you know, if what they were telling me was correct, if that was correct, I said, wait a minute, he's the one Son of God, he's without sin, he's awake,
Yeah. Okay.
I have no respect for this guy. I have none whatsoever. What struggle does he have?
Oh. Yeah.
Okay? What problems does he
Right.
have?
Exactly.
How can he be a savior to me?
Yeah.
He's nothing. You're perfect. You're created special. I'm the one stuck here with a human ego mind. I got these things to deal with, and you're over there, and you're going to tell me how to live? I got no respect for that.
Right.
None whatsoever.
You don't know
They
what I'm
teach you
talking about.
separation.
When they taught, now when I looked at, as you're describing Jesus, he had a human mind. Now when I read the Bible for myself after having this experience, I read, it behooved him to be made just like man, with an ego mind, with the frailties of having moments of temptation where he succumbed to the temptation. Oh,
Yeah.
now I have respect for him.
Okay, now he knows.
Now
where
it's a
coming
different
from.
picture, isn't it?
Yeah.
Absolutely, and
Yeah.
you're right. Now when we see him in that light, oh, now he's a savior.
Yeah. But
Before he was nothing.
it was in the 300s after what's his name?
Constantine.
Constantine kind of allowed that new Christianity to come to certain, but that's where they attached that mythology. It was a Greek mythology that they plunked on Jesus' head then and said, yeah, he's the guy that if you hadn't been killed, the rest of humanity would go down the tubes or something. But he said that was a conditional thing, and they applied that value to him, that he died so God would like you better. And all the other accoutrements that go along with all that mythologies that got assigned to him. And it's like, what? He's born perfect? Poof, there he shows up? I don't know.
Well, this is where that Old Testament and the New Testament now. When we look in many of the old concepts, they tried to take the old concepts into the new, and they don't fit.
No,
you know,
exactly.
there's
I'm trying to make it a continuation, but it's not really, it's incongruous.
exactly, and that's what we're going to talk just a little bit about here. You will experience rebirth and come back to life when you have this experience that we talked about, non-judgmental mind and becoming the Christ consciousness. Christ spoke the same truth and delivered the same message that you will find at the core of most major religions, and this is very interesting too.
Yes.
If you were to sum up the message of Christ, I would say he delivered a perfect understanding of love. Now, doesn't mean he had it with him 24/7 his entire life, but he delivered it. Okay? First, by explaining the words, and then by becoming the living example. Christ demonstrated that it was possible to live while consciously connected to God. He did. Now,
do that, yeah.
he didn't do it 100% of the time, as you helped us see, and I agree wholeheartedly. He did it at times. So in 1 John 4:16. So we know and believe the love God has for us. God is love. And he who abides in love abides in God, and God abides in him. Now, what we've talked
That's
about
one
here,
of the basics of Essenism.
it is.
Yeah.
Well, it's also in the Hindu tradition.
See,
It's
right.
also, I mean, in terms of this, in terms of God being the summation of all. Okay. Now, if we looked at love,
Buddha would have said the same thing.
and Buddha would have said the same.
Yeah.
So it's a universal message.
Yeah,
It's a
right.
universal message.
God is omnipresent, right? And so if we look and we say that the summation of all that exists is God. Okay, so now the dream that we experience, we believe in separation,
Isn't that where, yeah.
right?
Yeah.
We believe in separation.
Yeah.
God's out there, we're over here.
I've never
That's an
believed
Okay,
inherent quality.
well, I'm saying in the general consensus of the world, in terms of our physical being, God is outside of us. Okay, but if God is omnipresent, then of course, wait a minute. The Bible also says we live, breathe, and have our being in the body of God. Oh, what does that mean? That means I can't, wait a minute, God's inside me, God's outside of me, God's here, God's there, everything. Okay? So, and here, this was talking about, so we know and believe that that the love God has for us, God is love, and he who abides in love abides in God. Well, if we say God is love, God is love.
Yeah.
Now, experientially we're talking about here now. Okay, experientially experiencing, not just what is, because we all know it is. God is the summation of all, God is love, therefore we're all experiencing on that level. However, within the dream, we all have individualized limits. Okay? We all have our belief system. No one can escape their own belief system. As you believe, so shall it be. Now, that's only in terms of experience. Okay? Experience. So So we experience what? We experience a dream. We're not experiencing reality. If we see any form of separation, we're experiencing a dream. It's not real. That's why the Course in Miracles says, that which is real cannot be threatened. That which is unreal does not exist. Therein lies the peace of God. So I said, when I read that, I said, if people understand that, they don't need to read the rest of the book. It's done. Finished business. You know, I mean, you realize now, oh, wait a minute, it's all God. If it's all God, then everything that's in here that is not seeing this and believing this is based on an illusion. It's not real. So what do? I let this go. If I let this go, what do I experience? Reality. I'm reborn. Okay? So anyway, that's what rebirthing really is about letting go of illusion and waking up to reality. Reality always was, always will be, it will never change. What changes? Anybody ever change their mind about something? Anybody ever judge anybody and then change their mind this way or that way? And we do it, we vacillate all the time. Did Jesus not overturn those tables at one moment? He had a judgmental mind in that moment. Right, absolutely. At first glance, the message appears to be simple enough. So one might ask, why is there so much confusion? The answer is that man is challenged when it comes to understanding. The words we use get in the way. For example, take the word love. In almost all cases, it conjures up a certain image in the human mind. In addition, if the image is based on a personal relationship, or personal relationships rooted in the world of form, relationships overshadow the big picture. One cannot help but have a distorted view. Okay, hear a love song on the radio, Valentine's Day, I love you forever, yada yada yada. You know, all these things, we got love. Love comes into our mind, we got a picture. All of us do. We all have a picture. And that picture, inevitably, is going to be limited. Except for Doug's. Everyone's got a...
Right.
Wow.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
He's up there with the scenes, man.
He's up there with the scenes, I'll tell you what. Go Doug.
We apply emotion to love.
We apply emotion.
That's right.
Boy, that confuses us.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does.
Love is beyond emotions.
Yeah.
In a book, The Eye of the Eye by Hawkins, he said, love is mistakenly identified with emotions. Love is not emotions, but at the level of awareness. And that's exactly what it is. Because God is omnipresent. And if you could recognize that omnipresence, you would also recognize the perfection of the moment. You would not judge it. And you would just be aware. So, this is why I said at the very beginning, our concept of good, if it's based on a judgmental mind, is limited and flawed. I know not what to do in the next moment. I don't know to do good if I'm one with the moment. I may be directed to do good. Spirit will direct me. Why did Jesus come into his particular point in time, his particular situation, have those parents? Did Jesus have the omniscient view to create all of those circumstances? No. But God does. God has the omniscient view to create the exact situation and throw John into this equation, and then throw the Essenes over here and say, hey, here's what you're going to experience. Okay? There is a perfection in every moment. Always is. Always will be. Relative to choices we're making, of course. And many people make choices that are not quite perfect for the unfoldment of their consciousness. Okay, but it will always be perfect relative to the choice they make. If I say, I'm busy, I want to screw all this stuff. I want to go rob a bank and go live my life in the Bahamas and just sleep on an island somewhere. I can do that. It's the choice. You know, and I'm allowed. God will say, hey, you got free will, do whatever you want. Rest assured, I will not experience the outcome that I would experience if I continue on the path that I have agreed to follow. Okay? So we all make choices. We're going to have experiences relative to the choice we make. Simple stuff. Okay, the unconditional love that Jesus taught was not personal but universal. It was contrary to how man previously understood it. Not everyone can understand it fully even now. Yeah, look at our world. Yeah. It is only after you develop your spiritual eyes and accept higher truth that Jesus' teaching could be fully realized. Realization of truth is a prerequisite to salvation. That's a big one.
Say that again, the last sentence.
Okay. Realization of truth
Of truth.
is a prerequisite to salvation.
What
Now,
do they use the word salvation though?
I'm sorry?
What contents?
Okay, when I say
That's-
salvation,
Yeah, that's a,
okay,
that's a loaded
yeah,
Christian.
yeah. Well, see,
I don't get that.
let me say this. Okay, let's take the word salvation and explain it
And it's defined.
and define it. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Let me say it this way. Realization of truth is a prerequisite to okay. Experience. It's relative to the experiencing of unconditional love, which is God. Okay. That's what I meant by salvation. I said salvation because
Oh, okay,
this was germane to the Christian dogma and doctrine and all of the verbiage that they're familiar with. In other words, what I'm saying is the awakened state. The awakened state. Okay, beyond even the dimensions that are talked about, you know, going from this dimension to that dimension to that dimension, but I'm talking about just, boom, waking up and in experiencing the fullness, not degrees, but the whole. And if we could understand that through non-judgment, you will experience that. You have no choice but to experience that. It is not enough simply to believe that Jesus came to die for our sins and is our Lord and Savior. This is what I wanted to help Christians understand. Jesus came here, as Doug indicated, to be transformed from a limited view to a spiritual view, from a judgmental mind to an unconditional loving mind. Granted, he vacillated a few times, but in the end, he overcame. This is why it says in the Bible, Jesus says, anyone who overcomes this world will not be hurt by the second death. So in other words, anyone who emulates and practices and lives that level of consciousness that Christ came to teach, meaning, I'm in the world, I'm not of the world, I'm not judging the world, but I'm going to participate while I'm here. If you live that, you will not be hurt of the second death. You will have this experience of moving yourself to the highest level of creation, beyond levels. You'll just move to an awakened state. That's what this was all about. And if you don't, here's what Jesus himself said. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, shall enter the kingdom of heaven, but he who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. So anyone who says, thank you, Jesus, thank you, you saved me, I'm saved, I accept you, forget it. It's not going to, that carries no water.
In that, what, something about the will, you say that and read that again?
He says only the ones who do the will of the Father will have this experience. Because now what is the will of the Father?
Well, I think the word will might be intent.
Okay, you know what, let's go just a little deeper here and then I think it's going to get very clear.
Huh?
Is it possible for man to understand and do the will of the Father as Jesus instructed? To answer the question, it becomes necessary to know what Jesus said was the will of his Father. His response was clear. Here's what Jesus said. Here's the will of the Father. He answered, you shall love the Lord your God with your whole heart, with your whole soul, and all of your strength, and with all of your mind, and your neighbor as yourself.
See?
That
Okay.
comes from the Old Testament.
Comes from the Old Testament. But he is now explaining from a spiritual view what the Old Testament was saying. And from that spiritual view means, wait a minute, what's not God?
There isn't anything.
Okay, so God the Father is everything. Okay, so if we're to love God with your whole, love everything with your whole heart, your whole mind, your whole soul, and your neighbor as yourself, my neighbor, every single person, and I are one. There's no separation now. There's no Jew, there's no Christian, there's no Muslim, there's one. There's a universal oneness. That's what he's trying to teach here. Coexistence as, it's God. It's God. The murderer, God. The atheist, God. The saint, God. Everyone, God. Every single one is God. I'm supposed to love every single one equally. Not the saint more than the murderer. Not the murderer more than the saint. But all equally. Okay? So anyway, that's what Jesus was really teaching, is the will of the Father. To love God means to go beyond that which serves ego and to live only for that which serves God. This means that all things in this world must be viewed through the eyes of your higher self. That's kind of what we were just talking about. Failing to do this will always result in producing a distorted view based on ego, i.e. that which is most important to the personal self. Either we see that, or we see things relative to our individualized personal view. My son, my mother, my father, my husband, my family, my country, my. Anything that's mine is in direct contradiction to what Jesus was asking us to do. Simple. And in Mark, and he began to teach them that the Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders and the chief priests and the scribes and be killed. And after 3 days, rise again. Well, this is appropriate for Easter. Here we are, see? And he said this plainly. And Peter took him and began to rebuke him. Okay? Now that was interesting. And turning and seeing his disciples, he rebuked Peter and said, "Get behind me, Satan." Now this is his disciple. He becomes an apostle. And he's calling him Satan. For you are not on the side of God.
Peter knew what he meant. It wasn't offensive. It just was.
You are not on the side of God, but on the side of men.
Yeah.
So you're seeing things through the human eyes, not through your spiritual eyes.
Yeah.
And he called him, the multitude with the disciples, and said to them, "If any man would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me." It's not an easy job for us to walk in this world, be in the world, not of the world, and forsake all of our worldly things and people and Not many people will choose to walk down this road. It's very difficult at times. I had a moment myself.
What?
For whosoever, now this is interesting too, for whosoever shall save his life will lose it. And whosoever loses his life for my sake in the Gospels will save it. Now let's stop that right there for a second before we go on. Now, let's look at this. Here we are in the now. Okay? Now Jesus is basically saying, look, you want to experience the rebirth and you want to experience true reality, you have to make a choice. If you choose to do the will of the Father, if you choose to follow me, you're going to have it. If you don't, you don't. You don't have it. Why? Here we are in the now. We say yes, we say no. Simple, right? Yes or no. Both of these is putting out energy. Both of these are going to come back and bring us an experience. You see how whatever you choose in every given moment brings you an experience. Simple. It's not a question, are you worthy? No, it's not a worthy. It's a question of, did you choose this or do you choose that? If you choose that, God's gonna honor your choice. Has to. Give you what you call for. You want more of the same? Stay. You don't? Change your mind. Simple. For what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and forfeit his life? Now, what he's talking about here is you're not alive if you have attachments to living for the world. You're not seeing the real reality. You're living. Everyone in the world's living. They're walking, talking, but they're not alive. They're not really alive. They're the walking dead. They can say what they are. They're the walking dead. For what can a man give in return for his life? For whoever is ashamed of me and of my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, of him will the Son of Man be ashamed when he comes in the glory of his Father with the holy angels. Now, I don't know what the actual words were before the translations, but I can tell you this: what Jesus was really trying to show here was whatever you're choosing, you're going to experience. And I can't make adjustments for you. I can't put in a good word for you when you come and you say, hey, I meant to do this, I meant to do that, I would have, can't you cut me some slack? It's not a question of that. See, because there is no judgment in terms of, that's why Jesus said, I didn't come here to judge you but to save you. He said, the Father will never judge you. He said, all judgment is of the Son, meaning the Spirit within. Each of us is going to live our own reality relative to choices. And no one and nothing can alter that and make it something else. Jesus is not going to say, hey Dad, look, Doug tried. He's only human. So what if he couldn't let go of this?
Yeah.
He didn't. I put a good word in for you, but you know what he said? Too bad.
Nice try, Doug.
Nice try.
Yeah.
You only got
Go bump your nose again. Try it again. Yeah.
This is a good example of how ego's idea of love and unconditional love differ. Peter in his humanness was speaking from his ego mind when he rebuked Jesus. Peter was allowing his feelings of attachment to Jesus to cloud his consciousness, which we all have a tendency to do this. Our personal relationships will many times get in the way of our truly sharing and experiencing unconditional love.
A wee bit of fear built into that. That's why probably.
Fear, absolutely.
So he would say something like that. See?
Yeah. Well, and again, most I've said this many times, what most people call love in this world is not real love, but fear. Our relationships. Now, I'm not saying that we don't have moments of love within the relationship, but for the most part, most relationships are not based on love, but fear. And
Fear of
I'm going to
loss.
love you unless you do this. I'm going to love you until such. Whatever. We draw these lines, and the line was because we have fear in the back of our mind, and so most of what the world calls love is a using relationship more so than a real loving relationship. And it's just the way of the world. I don't want to get into judging why it exists, but that's the way it exists. It's not really based on unconditional love for the most part. It is what it is.
What is your definition of unconditional love?
Definition of unconditional love?
Your definition.
My definition of unconditional love would be to interact in the moment and recognizing that everything is God, and to carry that vibration. Not that I do it every moment, but everything and everyone is a divine, perfect creation. The only thing that gets in the way of my experiencing that, or anyone else experiencing that, is the intellectual thinking mind, where we put a value on. So I'd say unconditional love is washing away all values and making everything precious. Precious beyond description.
Yeah. That's a, a real distant version of it. A simple one would be like this. Your grandchildren never send you a thank you note or call you up and say thank you for their birthday present they just sent you, or you just sent them, or whatever. But so you say, I don't know if I'll send those kids anything. They never say thank you anyhow. And I turn around. This is my wife saying something. So I turn around and say, no. Just keep sending them candy. All the candy you can send them. Just send them all kinds of candy. That's unconditional love. Nothing's conditional about why you send them candy. Just do it. See, and it's not waiting for the kids to properly respond.
Right.
Yeah, just do it.
It's not based upon some action that they,
No.
I've seen it here many times. I've seen parents come in here and many times the kids are here and they did good in school. This is their reward. Okay?
Oh,
So in that moment, we're not teaching our children real, true, unconditional love. It's, you did good, I reward you. You don't do good, I have to now punish you. No ice cream today. There's no ice cream because you were not good.
Yeah.
And unconditional love would be they're good in school, they got an ice cream. They're bad in school, they got an ice cream. No matter what happens.
Well, it's also in the incident you just described in a sense, because when I go shopping for something for my grandson, I'm thinking about him, I'm feeling him, I'm trying to decide what he would like.
Yeah.
So I'm getting a payoff even before I send that gift. If you're conscious of it, you really are.
Yeah.
So the thought process and everything
never
else.
thought of it that way.
Yeah, there's that expression, the giver is the receiver. You cannot give without receiving, and you can't get without giving. We're all experiencing every moment relative to our thoughts and beliefs. And this is why I say, to me, unconditional love means I have to be empty. The Bhagavad Gita talks about the state of unconditional love, and it says, blessed is the man that is content amongst criticism or praise. In other words, no matter what's going on in the outward world, I am not affected by the circumstances surrounding my everyday occurrences. I am stable and centered, and I am in one with God. That's unconditional love. It takes a little practice for us to get there. And I would say there's a tremendous amount of detaching that we must go through, because we all have a lot of attachments to things and people, and especially our belief systems. I think our belief systems are the hardest things for us to let go of.
And not necessarily our religious belief system.
No,
Oh, no.
no, any kind of belief
You're
system.
dull,
Yeah.
or,
Yeah.
not attractive, or whatever.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, you ever see that movie Shallow Hell?
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
It was just on the-
Yeah, that was cute. I mean, that's the human
Yeah.
nature. We this is what we see, and this is what we're looking for. And to be in the state of unconditional love means I can't operate in that mode any longer. Have to change. I have to have a transformation of self.
Either that or get hypnotized. One or the other.
He'd be hypnotized. Oh, absolutely. But anyway, Peggy, we reached 8 o'clock. A little bit already. Yeah.
I'm actually the first to leave.
But anyway, let me just finish this one paragraph, and then we'll.
Okay.
And then we'll. Blah, blah, blah. Sometimes the feelings that we think of love are in fact the opposite, which is fear originating in the ego. And that's why I said it's fear. Anything that originates from the ego judgmental mind is going to be based in fear. Anything. Even what we think of as good. That's the part that is very hard for us. Even what we think. I'm sorry?
All the people
Yeah.
tell their kids about Santa Claus. You better be good or you won't get a
Better be
present.
good.
We teach them. Oh,
Yeah,
we teach our kids
The
fear.
whole thing.
Reward and punishment, like I said, I mean, reward and punishment, the concept is being reinforced on a daily basis when a kid comes in for an ice cream. They were good, they got an ice cream.
Yeah.
They're bad, they don't get it. So what are we thinking? If I'm good, I get. If I'm bad, I don't. And so what do we see? We see dualistic thinking. This is the way it is. It's supposed to be. And we're reinforcing that. Rather than say, look, I love you if you do this, I love you if you do that. And I've done my best with my son to try to say to him, look, whatever you do, you're going to do. I want him, and I say to him, hey, here's the way the world operates. Here's the way it is. Here's what the government says. Here's the law. If you go outside the law, that most likely will happen. I'm not going to change how I feel about you if you do this. I'm not going to change how I feel if you do that. I'm not going to love you more or less if you're good. I'm not going to love you more or less if you became a doctor or a street sweeper. You know, it's the same thing. Whatever. Whatever path you choose, I love you. You don't have to prove yourself to me. My love is not contingent upon what you do. It doesn't matter. I'm here to help. Have any questions? And so my son shared a lot of stuff with me over the years that, you know, that I never expected to hear. But hey, you know, that's what I want. I said, how can I help him if he won't come to me? And if I'm teaching him dualistic good and bad, and you know, then he's going to say, well, I can go so far. This is the one line I can't cross. I can't tell my father about this.
Right.
Now, when he really needs help, I can't be there. He's going to go somewhere else and talk to somebody who's not really in a position to help him. So I didn't want to do that. So I've done everything I could to be non-judgmental and let him do whatever he wanted. I mean, and he did some stuff that, you know, if I was of the mindset, I'd say, wow, I can't, how can I possibly let him do that?
Did you have boundaries within your house though?
Only in that, only this. I said, don't involve me. Don't bring, I said,
Are you going to jail?
I said, yeah. I said, look, you're gonna do illegal stuff. I said, you're gonna, if you're doing drugs, you're not keeping them in my house. Keep them in the woods somewhere, do what you want to do, but you're not bringing them in my home where now you directly involve me.
Yeah.
I say, your path is your path. I'll help you, I'll support you, I'll love you. But you will not bring me into that situation.
What about
Yeah.
put your socks in the laundry baskets? That
No.
That kind of stuff that you didn't do?
No. Well, I mean, I would say to him, here's what I would like you to do, you know. But if he does it, he does it. If he doesn't, you know, he's a kid, whatever. I mean, I'm not going to be upset if he doesn't. I would tell him, here's what I would like,